All right, welcome back to lecture number 82. This is historical topic 8.8, the Vietnam War, and our theme again is America in the world. You may have just watched lecture number 81 about America as a world power during the Cold War, and you might have been thinking, well, it sounds like there's one big topic that's missing here because I remember hearing about the Vietnam War. And the thing is that the Vietnam War is so significant that it gets its own historical topic. So let's go into the learning objective. That is, explain the causes and effects of the Vietnam War. And we're going to start here with some of the causes. Post-war decolonization and the emergence of powerful nationalist movements in Asia led both sides in the Cold War to seek allies among new nations, many of which remained non-aligned. So we've seen this key concept before in the last lecture, but now we're really focusing on Vietnam as a topic for this key concept. Vietnam used to be a French colony, and at the end of World War II, France tries to reclaim it as a colonial territory, but there is such a resistance from the Vietnamese people that France eventually gives up and gives them some degree of independence. There are two governments that emerge at the end of this. Divided by the 17th parallel, a communist government emerges in the north under Ho Chi Minh, and then an anti-communist government in the south led by Ngo Dinh Diem. And again, we've talked about this in the last lecture. Sometimes our support of anti-communist countries or anti-communist governments is not necessarily the same thing as supporting democratic governments, because Ngo Dinh Diem was also unpopular with some of the South Vietnamese. You see the leaders of both countries in pictures in the top right. You see Ho Chi Minh with East German sailors. Remember, East Germany was controlled by the Soviet Union, so there's that communist similarity there. And then on the top left, you see Ngo Dinh Diem arriving in an airport with Dwight Eisenhower and John Foster Dulles. The United States is going to continue to support Diem from 1955 to 1961 until he starts to lose favor with his own people. And the Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles, is going to create a defense pact with Southeast Asian countries, and including some European countries like the UK, France, and Australia, and New Zealand as well, to try and prevent this domino theory from coming true. So, concerned by expansionist communist ideology and Soviet repression, the United States sought to contain communism through a variety of measures, including a military engagement in Vietnam. President Kennedy takes power in 1961, right around the same time that Ngo Dinh Diem starts to lose favor of his own people. But to try and continue to maintain some sort of order, the United States begins to send military advisors, in quotations, really just soldiers that are non-combat roles. In 1962, a couple of weeks before Kennedy is assassinated himself, Diem is overthrown and killed. In 1964, there is an incident in the Gulf of Tonkin. You can see where that is in the map that's next to Kennedy, where American ships are supposedly attacked by North Vietnamese troops. And that is going to give the President, Lyndon Baines Johnson, the authorization that he needs from Congress to begin sending troops and to contain the North Vietnamese spread. At the peak of the Vietnam War, we have 500,000 troops in Vietnam. And in '68, as the United States has been fighting this for 4 years and starting to grow in its involvement in the region, the North Vietnamese attack U.S. bases across all of South Vietnam during the Chinese or the Lunar New Year, called the Tet holiday. So the attack becomes called the Tet Offensive. The United States repels most of the attacks. It's seen as a military draw, but because of the publicity that it generated, the American people start to see that the war is not going quite as well as their leaders have been telling them, and we begin to see some disgruntled Americans beginning to protest against the United States involvement in Vietnam. When President Nixon gets elected in 1968, him and his advisor and later Secretary of State Henry Kissinger enter with the Vietnamization strategy. They knew that the Vietnam War was unpopular and that they needed to get out, but they needed to do it in a way that would not make it seem like the United States lost. So their Vietnamization strategy meant that they were going to supposedly train new South Vietnamese troops and at the same time withdraw some US troops. We would continue to send South Vietnam military aid and supplies, but we would no longer be sending American soldiers to fight. And eventually that's kind of worked. American soldiers begin to leave Vietnam, and so therefore American casualties begin to go down. By 1973, both North and South signed the Paris Accords. These peace talks had begun in 1968 when LBJ saw the discontent by the American people, but they stalled in 1968. A new biography on Richard Nixon claims that the Nixon campaign asked the North Vietnamese to not agree to anything until he'd become president. And that's why it took another 5 years for the war to come to a full conclusion. And the United States finally removes all U.S. personnel by 1975. And when the United States leaves, the North Vietnamese overrun South Vietnam. And we have the fall of Saigon, which was the capital city of South Vietnam. All right, so next key concept, Americans debated the appropriate power of the executive branch in conducting foreign and military policy. LBJ got Congress authorization to send troops into Vietnam through a resolution, the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. It was not a formal declaration of war. And as the American people found out all of the terrible things that happened in this war, like the blanket bombings of North Vietnam, which was called Operation Rolling Thunder, the United States would be using chemicals like napalm that would burn civilians. We would do bombing campaigns in the neighboring countries of Cambodia and Laos because that was where the North Vietnamese were using as transportation or trying to go past the South Vietnamese defenses. The U.S. military's My Lai massacre, where U.S. soldiers massacred civilians, and then the leak of the Pentagon Papers, which shifts public opinion against the war itself because it shows that the United States had been actually quite involved in Vietnam before the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, and that we had been carrying out these massive bombing campaigns, and that we had been bombing neutral neighboring countries. And there's a backlash to all of this. There are more protests across college campuses. There's, burning a draft card is a sign of support for the anti-war movement, and there is a growth for anti-war candidates in the 1968 election. Senator Eugene McCarthy challenges LBJ in the 1968 primary, and Congress will also react by passing the War Powers Act, which will try to limit the president's war-making power. And the constitutionality to that has yet to be tested, because since then, all presidents have been able to get declaration of wars or resolutions from Congress to enter into a military conflict. Now, the two boxes that are blacked out, they are sensitive images. One is of the My Lai massacre, or victims from the My Lai massacre, and the other one is a student that was shot by the Ohio National Guard at Kent State. So if you are sensitive to these pictures, you can skip ahead, but I will show them here just very shortly. So there's victims of the My Lai massacre, and I guess the other one you won't get to see because now we're at the recap. All right, so the United States sought to keep dominoes from falling in Southeast Asia. So this is the entire reason why the United States is so active in military conflicts, because of this domino theory. The Gulf of Tonkin attack draws the United States into the conflict. The war was devastating to the Vietnamese. Between 1 and 2 million people are estimated to have died who were Vietnamese during these years, and 58,000 American soldiers also were casualties of this war. All right, so that's it for this lecture. Thank you for watching. Please come back and watch lecture number 83, and I'll see you then.